Want to go far in business and in life? You can't do it alone. The secret is expanding your network of personal relationships, building friendships, connecting on an intimate level, away from the office, over a coffee or cocktail. Welcome to All In with the real Nate Payo. The show that asks what happens when you go all in and leverage the power of your network of personal relationships.
Hello, welcome to the All In podcast with Nate Payo. Of course, as I say every time, I am your host, Nate Payo. Today, I'm joined with Briar Harvey. Briar is an author, a podcaster, and a system expert. She works with niche businesses to create sustainable business systems built around organic marketing and community building. She delights in telling stories and believes that systems are what allow people to have a problem to connect with a product or service that solves that problem, not about inbox zero and making kittens cry. We'll get to that part at the end of the show. I almost rolled right into where they could find you, but you have to listen to get the goods. You can't just skip to the end of the story. Welcome to the show, Briar. How are you?
I'm great. Pleasure to be here.
So, did I butcher the inbox
No, you
zero?
did really well. No, you rolled right on through it. So well that you almost rolled right on through to the end. So
I know we almost skipped the good stuff. Well, welcome to the show. This is a show we were chit-chatting a little bit before we started recording. And if you know anybody from Nebraska, maybe you can relate to it. And if you don't know anybody from Nebraska, then this is probably irrelevant until you meet somebody from Nebraska, and then you'll probably roll your eyes because you heard about this. But I'm from Nebraska. Briar lives in Nebraska. So we had to have our obligatory Nebraska Cornhusker rah-rah conversation. And
even though there's no football or anything going on right now, we still had to talk about the Cornhuskers.
We still had to. It's interesting, but what's funny is like when you talk about networking and meeting people, it's usually about something relatable. And I don't know why Nebraska people like always relate and gravitate towards Husker football, but they do. And if you ever meet anybody from Nebraska, it's an easy way to get a conversation going. So if you're ever looking to cold call anybody, tip number one, if they're from Nebraska, your lead is, how about them Huskers,
And they'll have an answer for you. Even if they're not Huskers fans, they'll have an answer for you because we are obligatory Husker fans, all of us.
They are. So very cool. So I usually like to start my show, just kind of get the conversation going with this question on luck. And I'd like to get your take on what you believe luck means to you, and are people lucky?
Man, that's a tough one. So to answer a question about luck, I have to tell you a little bit about my story. I have been an entrepreneur forever. And I had a lemonade stand as a kid, and it just that streak never really went away. And I started I think my son is, so about 10 years ago now, I started a business selling custom massage oils and personal lubricants. It was all very high-end, organic, niche stuff. And I did it for a couple of years, and people said to me, Briar, you're really good at this, but you keep talking about sex. You should get paid for that. And so I started coaching. It became this very nice, easy transition for me. And I spent about 3 years working as a sex and relationship coach. Now, mind you, this is 8 years ago, before industry regulation had really come along. I am not a licensed coach. I would probably not hang up a shingle now, but I did at the time, and I was doing the work, and I was selling classes and launching programs and doing all of those really good things. So 5 years ago, I was pregnant with my third child. I was 36 weeks along. It is important to note that in Nebraska, home birth is illegal. It is one of 2 states in the country where you cannot legally give birth at home. And so your options are a hospital or to deliver with an underground midwife or to deliver unassisted. It was my third child. I was a doula. I thought, I've got this. So I was planning on delivering at home. I had not been seeing a doctor for maternal care other than I'd been chatting with a midwife friend who'd been taking my vitals and we'd worked together over the phone, but I wasn't seeing a doctor. And I had just launched my first big program. It was my first 5-figure launch, which for entrepreneurs, that's the big one. When you get the 5-figure launch, that's when you know that you've made it, right? And it was for women who had given birth and needed help recovering their sex lives. And there I was, 36 weeks pregnant, about to give birth. And I had a full-term stillbirth and nearly died.
Oh my gosh.
Placenta ruptured from my uterus. I nearly bled to death. And when I got to the hospital, when they could not find a heartbeat, the first words out of my mouth were, "Oh my God, I killed my baby." So that's my luck. And I have spent the last 5 years trying to recover from this. I tanked my business because I certainly couldn't talk to women about how to get their sex lives back with a baby when I had no baby.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have income. We ended up briefly homeless and then living in my mother-in-law's basement with my 2 older children. I am 5 years later still paying off what I like to call dead baby bills, because the administration of loss is such that while I theoretically could have gotten all of my medical bills forgiven, I would have had to deal with calling people and filling out forms, and I just lost a child. I was stuck in bed with anemia. I could barely get dressed or feed myself. I could not figure out how to get on a phone and apply for debt forgiveness. So here I am 5 years later, and this is still very much a part of my daily life. I still have these bills that we have to pay off because, let me tell you, loss is incredibly expensive. When someone dies, we don't really talk about how much money it costs, but it's not just the funeral expenses and it's not just the medical expenses. It's the lost wages. It's the emotional toll. It's the social toll. And when we talk about networking, this is really important because people don't actually know how to deal with loss very well. And the network that I thought that I had was not there for me when I needed them to be there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a very powerful, story you just shared. And you're right. Like, hearing about loss does make people uncomfortable. And, when I don't really feel like I can fully explain my feelings towards something about this, because it's different for the mother than it is for the father. But I know, when my wife had I guess a miscarriage early on, it was very, very early, like 6.5, 7 weeks. That was pretty traumatizing. But it's a lot different story than when it's near full term, and that's something that I guess you realize like, hey, I know it sucked. I know it was really hard for my wife. Now imagine how somebody else must feel to lose somebody at that. And you probably really have a hard time like empathizing with their emotions in a way that you feel like I can be compassionate about it in a sense. You just feel like, hey, it's uncomfortable. I don't know what to do, so it's best I just avoid it. And I think
Yes.
that's tough because you're by yourself and you're going, hey, there's a whole bunch of shit I've got to deal with that's not pleasant. Like I just lost a child, and whether it's born or 10 years old, it's somebody that you are attached to and you had hopes and visions and dreams and love for. Um, and to have somebody that could be supportive and be like, hey, I'm going to like you handle you, I'm going to take care of these phone calls you need to make or help you out. That's a real challenge to be to overcoming. I mean, I'm guessing you've probably, friendships have faded since then, and but have you been able to develop support in friendships along the way with other people?
It's really interesting how very deliberate I am about relationship building now. And it's been a challenge for me with Corona and dealing with not being able to do those kinds of support building activities. About 2 years ago, I started a local women's group, and I just gathered women to me. Many of them had also lost children. So there was some commonality, and there was a place where we could go and be together in support. Well, of course, we met in person, and shared potlucks and did those kinds of things together communally. And we have not met in months, and it's been very difficult to lose those kinds of supportive avenues. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, do you think that they're able to rekindle, or are they able to do, because right now we're in the COVID shutdown, stay-at-home orders. I think Nebraska's maybe a little bit looser than California
Oh,
on
yeah,
what you're allowed to do.
significantly.
But like how does one go about maintaining? That's not. It's just like, okay, it's one thing to say. I'm maybe going off a bit on a tangent, but it's like, okay, I don't see my friends, I don't see my work cohorts, but you go, okay, what about the people that are dealing with severe trauma, severe depression, severe anxiety, severe addictions, and they're used to going to these support groups
Mhm.
that rely a lot on interaction and personal connection. And it's not quite the same always getting on a phone call with somebody. You want to, you know, process it. So, it's probably, I'll be honest with you, it's not something that's crossed my mind in a lot of significant thought of how people deal with that. Like, it's occurred to me because I've conversed with other people that are in, gray area drinking support groups, but it's more like, hey, we got on and kind of talk, but we didn't really go with somebody that's like, hey, I have very, very debilitating things that if I don't work through them, I might have struggle getting through the day. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that's how you navigate that. And what have you been doing to get through?
I personally have transitioned at least some of my support networks online. So a Zoom call is still an amazing thing, even if it's not in person.
Hmm.
And there's obviously teletherapy and those kinds of avenues for people when they are in desperate need. Although personally, I don't care for teletherapy. I would much rather go and see my therapist in person because it is easier to avoid a conversation when it's in a safe space. When I have to go to my therapist's office, it's very much a mental switch for me of, okay, I'm here to talk about this thing now. I'm here to be in this space and do this thing versus being at home and trying to integrate that into my home space.
Hmm. Yeah, that's definitely so. Not to change topics too much, but you did talk about you do have another business now,
Mhm.
and you talked about you had a business that failed because you I guess basically shut it
I
down.
blew it up.
You
Yes.
blew it up. So how did you, decide like, hey, this is something I want to start doing. I want to get into this space of creating again. And I want to build a business maybe other than like the need of like, I need an income, but, what led you to that decision? Like, hey, I need to get back on my feet and start working towards something.
So my systems were the thing that saved my life. And when I talk about systems, most people hear things like project management software or automation or inbox zero. When I say systems, most people hear digital processes. But what I'm really talking about are things like habits and routines.
Mm-hmm.
And my systems saved my life. It started slowly with things like meal prep. I'd start preparing meals on the weekend so that I would always have food available during the week for myself and my kids so that I didn't have to think about what that looked like. I'd lay out 5 days worth of clothes so that I didn't have to make a decision about what to wear. I just went to the closet and put something on. When I needed to start going back to work, I went back to copywriting because it is relatively easy to find copywriting work online.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm fairly talented at writing, and so that turned fairly quickly into course design and then figuring out people's systems, because somehow me figuring out my systems has translated into an understanding of what works and what doesn't work in someone else's personal systems.
Mm-hmm. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit about that?
Yes. So I think that I have an ability to see what you're doing that's costing time. When you build a habit, there are often what they call keystone habits. So it's the one pivotal thing that allows you to chain out all of the other things. A big one for a lot of people is making your bed. You get up in the morning, you make your bed, and then you're able to go on and do the next task, and then the next task after that. With personal habits, when we're looking at like planning and project management, sometimes it's a matter of figuring out the right system. Sometimes it's a matter of figuring out the right time. So the morning routine is a big one for a lot of people, where people get stuck because we're all told get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and do jumping jacks and then write 3 pages in your journal and do all of these things, and then you're going to be ready for your day. Well, I am a chronic night owl. I get up comfortably at 8:30, 9 o'clock in the morning, and then I spend the first hour of my day on Facebook. For years, I felt guilty about this, but I have structured my day in a way that allows for this space because it's actually the system that I need. I spend my mornings doing totally useless random things. I spend my afternoons with my family, and then after dinner I go and work 6 to 8 hours. Not that much usually anymore. Usually it's closer to 4 to 6 these days, and then I go to bed. So I've structured my day backward, comparatively speaking, to how you're supposed to. But you have to be able to identify what works for you and what isn't working for you. And I think for a lot of us, there's guilt around that. I'm not doing it the way I'm supposed to be doing it, so there must be something wrong with me, rather than there must be something wrong with the system.
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's an interesting way to look at it, because I don't know, maybe I'm guessing like way back when we were hunters and gatherers and cavemen, like we had to get up in the daytime and do our work because that's when we could see, and then we went to bed at night because we couldn't see what was going on. We needed our rest. But Interestingly enough, another gentleman I was talking to kind of said the reason why some people have different sleep cycles, like you're talking about, was because somebody had to stand guard.
Right.
If everybody went to sleep at night, then the beast would get us. And so so people develop different time schedules, and then you go into like modern day society, and it's like it's not natural to work at night. It's natural to be 8 to 5, 9 to 5, whatever that is. And then you go, why am I not successful at what I do? And it's because you're trying to fit square peg round hole, maybe,
Mhm.
into a system that doesn't work. And you're trying to, so then I think when you're fighting your values daily of just like habit systems, like what feels natural to you,
Mhm.
it makes your life so much more stressful than not, because in like probably the weekends when you're not working, you revert back to like what works for you. So if you like I work best if I sleep till noon, but if I have to get up at 6 on Monday through Friday, like I'm a wreck Monday through Friday, and then the weekends become and it's added stress to your life. So how do you identify with people to figure out what their systems, where they're wrong, where they need improvement, and guide them towards that solution?
That's a really good question. And the answer is, what do you like? What feels good? Not in a hedonistic way, in a what resonates kind of way. Most of us, when we stop and check in on a physical level, will be able to judge whether or not something is actually the right thing for us. We're not used to listening to our guts in this way. It's usually something that gets kicked out of us fairly early. But if you take that pause and go, does this feel good? Then chances are there's a reason for it. Now, there's a difference between self-care and self-comfort. And self-comfort are the kinds of things that we do that aren't actually good for us. That's 8 hours of Netflix, or drinking a 12-pack, or going out and buying rounds for all of our friends and, doing those sorts of things. That's self-comfort. Self-care is typically the stuff that feels good after we've done it.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's exercise, that's eating correctly, that's getting the right amount of sleep. And we know when we've gotten the right amount of sleep because we wake up and we feel good about it. But to get that sleep there, we have to go to bed a little bit before we're tired, or we have to set ourselves up in ways that we are regulating our sleep so that we're happy to be in bed.
Mm-hmm.
For people who, especially people who are not of the daytime set, self-regulation of sleep is very difficult. So sleep hygiene in particular for me means no TV in my bedroom.
Mm-hmm.
It means blackout blinds. It means that I have to have everything clean and tidied, and I have my aromatherapy in there because I want my bedroom to be a place where I go to sleep.
Yeah, that's important to do, and I think you talk. I think a lot of people that talk about sleep. What did you call it? Like
Sleep hygiene.
sleep hygiene. Um, it's about having your place of sleeping is for sleeping. It's not for making forts and watching TV shows and stuff like that. Some people even go to say, like, don't even read a book in bed. Don't bring your phone in bed, the blue light or whatever, but also maybe the distractions. And you make it identified, so hey, well, your body knows when you go in this spot, we're doing one thing only, and that's is for getting our rest. And we're setting habits, and that does go back to your habits and systems in place. And I was gonna, share a little dumb story of my own. Was that, like, I'm very habitual in the mornings too, and like it would be to the point where, like, I have to do things in this particular order, and if one thing happens out of the ordinary, like My wife would be like, "Why'd you leave your lunch on the counter? Or why'd you leave your coffee behind on the counter before you left?" I'd be like, "Well, I like it was trash day, so I took the trash out and I forgot everything else after that because it was like, you get up, you go downstairs, you make the coffee, you go to the bathroom, you pack your bag, you load up the car, you go everything, and you're like, oh, I stuck one thing inside my habit in the way. Everything else after that just fell apart, and I'm like, how did I get to the office with, you know, half my stuff? And it's crazy how that works out.
So that's called chaining, when we attach one task to another task so that they eventually become a routine by themselves. When you do it all together, it just becomes a rote process that you do every single time in the same order. And it has a lot of value for a lot of things. You forgot your breakfast, true, but when you chain for work habits or for other types of activities, it can allow you to reach a flow state much easier. So if you are a writer and you have the same rituals of turning your computer on and then getting out a pen and then closing all of your browsers and then turning on a specific song, by the time you go to start writing, your brain has already been integrated into that space.
So it is a good thing to have some daily routine and habits and building it on what works for you. So if I was to ask you the words all in, like what would you describe, like how does all in relate to what you teach your clients, what you teach people about habits and systems? How does all in relate to you?
I actually have something for you. It's the Jerry Seinfeld don't skip an X thing. So it's called the X effect. And there is a subreddit for it. So basically, Jerry's whole big thing was that if you want to do something, you do one little thing every single day. And you can't drop the chain. So when you are building a habit, they say it takes 30 days. But the reality is it takes you as long as it becomes a habit. If you do it every single day, it becomes ingrained. The minute you stop is the minute you stop. Whether you feel obligated to do it or not is irrelevant. If you stop, you're not, well, all in anymore. So habit formation and building those things is about commitment to yourself. It's about deciding that this is the person that you are now and that this is the thing that you do now.
Yeah,
and then you go from there.
that's very true. And habits, dude, like you're right. Like everybody says, like, oh, a habit takes weeks, days, these long periods of time. Is it 30 days, 60 days, 100 days? But at the same time, there's things that become habits in 2 days. And then there's things that like are habits for like 20 years. And then all of a sudden one day they're not, and it's weird how that does happen. So that kind of brings me to my next question. So somebody wants to work with you, somebody wants to listen to your podcast, read your book. Who is your ideal person, your listener that you like to work with?
So I have to be honest, I do not believe in niching. I am terrible, terrible, terrible about niching. So I have lots of people in lots of different places. If you want to listen to a podcast about kids' movies and swearing, yes, they go well together. I swear they go well together. You can find that at latchkeymovies.com. If you are a person who builds or does weird things in the business world, then I can probably help you monetize your weird shit. That is at briarharvey.com. My people are unique. They are geeks and weirdos, and they like being called that. I stopped apologizing for calling my people weirdos a long time ago because apparently they all just identify identify with it and let their freak flag fly. It's fine.
Mhm.
So my people do things that are outside of the realm of normal. They have small, teeny tiny businesses that serve a small segment of the population, and they have typically tried to do all the things the gurus have told them that they are supposed to do when it comes to building a business, and it hasn't worked for them. So they're looking for a different way to get their product out to a larger audience, or they're looking for a different way to sell a program that already exists.
Yeah. Well, I would say based on the conversation we had, it was definitely not nichey. We covered a lot of topics. You have clearly a lot of interests. You have a wide range of experiences, and I like the idea of embracing the inner weirdness or the inner weirdo. And um, I guess a lot of us, what am I, Gen X, or kind of grew up of like fitting the norm. You dress a certain way. You went to you tried to fit in, and I think a lot of us felt we struggled with life by trying to fit in. And then as we get older, and you go to like high school reunions and stuff, and everybody, like all the people you thought like, oh, they all fit in, and I never identified like I fit in, they tell you I didn't fit in either. And it's like, if you just kind of embrace who you are and let your weirdo freak flag fly, that's okay. And I think that should be encouraged more. It should be championed, because it leads to I think, at the beginning of the show, you brought up a very sensitive topic, and I was a little bit, like struggled to deal with your story. But at the same time, it's like when you hide who you are, say like, oh, I can't say I'm a little bit weird. How are you going to tell somebody you need help with something? Like, as a man, it's not okay a lot of times to say you're depressed or you struggle with addiction. And so then you choose not to get help. And then because you choose not to get help, your other relationships in life suffer. And that happens with a lot of people for a lot of things. So just being like, hey, it's okay to be who you are and share who you are. Like, stop worrying. And it's easy to say stop worrying what other people think, because for a lot of people, including myself, it's hard to like get out of your head because the stories we tell ourselves are challenging, but it helps to do that for sure.
So I have a reframe for you.
Yes.
When we're talking about attracting people, what we should think about is resonance. If something about your story repels someone, then it's going to attract someone else.
Mm-hmm.
So you can't worry about the people who you are driving away, because you have to worry about the people who you need to pull closer.
Mm-hmm. I love that, because you're right. We're maybe like the people we're worried about losing because we're being polarizing, that doesn't matter. Like, they're not meant to be in your life. People come and go. Some people come for a brief moment in life. Some people come from a longer time. And sometimes that's the point where the story with them ends. And then the new people come in and they take you to the new place. So you got a lot of knowledge for sure. So I don't know if you want to repeat where people can find you, but Briar Harvey's one spot, and your website didn't have it in the notes.
Latchkeymovies.com.
Yeah, latchkeymovies.com. So all that will be in the show notes. If you want to reach out and connect with Briar, I encourage you to do so. She's got a billion stories, and a very interesting person, and great to work with if you need help getting your systems checked out and figured out. Awesome. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much, Nate. This is great.
Thank you.
Make sure to visit our website, therealnatepeo.com, where you can subscribe to the show on iTunes, so you'll never miss an episode of All In. While you're at it, if you found value, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes, or if simply tell 2 friends about the show. Looking to connect? You can find Nate Peo on LinkedIn or Instagram.